Hey everyone, I'm Brittany Smith from LSA's Marketing and Communications Office, and you're watching Just in Time, a video series where we provide information of resources and support for students during the COVID-19 crisis. Today we have Jessica Garcia, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for LSA. Today, Jessica will talk a bit more about how her unit has adjusted to meet students' needs during this time of remote learning. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jessica. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. And so for folks who may not be too familiar with the term, what exactly does it mean to be an ally?
Well, it depends on who you ask. But in general, the way that I think about being a good ally is someone who advocates for and speaks up for and makes space for consistently folks from marginalized backgrounds. And so thinking about identity in lots of different directions, certainly in terms of race, that would be one identity, but also thinking in terms of sexuality or religion or ability, social class, gender. Each of those provides an opportunity where we just want to be mindful about who gets to talk and who gets to be represented and who's thriving in those spaces. And an ally would be attending to those and making sure to be intentional about bringing awareness to other folks about that.
And what advice do you have for students about how to be an ally?
Well, my advice for students would be the same as for anyone who's thinking about how to be an ally or be a better ally. For me, it comes down to four general concepts that require a lot of work. And so I say, listen, learn, engage, and commit. And so there's lots of different steps you can take within each of those, but those for me are the big four umbrellas. And so for a student, thinking about how to do those things with other students, thinking about how to do those things in the communities in which they're located, and thinking about professionally as they pursue their careers, what are the ways in which they could make sure that they're doing that within each of their disciplines.
And how can students be allies while learning remotely?
You know, it's tricky. There's a lot of research that's come out in the last couple of months that, interestingly, while we're at home, being an ally virtually is a challenge. What we're seeing happen is that networks that were tenuous or superficial have kind of fallen apart, and it's really difficult to build new networks virtually. What we're seeing happen in a lot of Zooms is that marginalized voices are often ignored or not even invited into the conversations. And so to be a good ally now requires a whole nother level of intentionality to really interrupt conversations or the flow of ideas to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. And that people are incorporated, right? So decisions are being made without everyone being included, and then nobody's kind of circling back to communicate those things. So what we're seeing remotely is that if we want to do this and do this well, we have to be even more intentional about shining the light in spaces that are often overlooked or amplifying voices that may be passed over or ignored or completely forgotten about, and whether that means asking the questions or redirecting the conversations or co-signing, right? If somebody says something, I really appreciate what that student said, let's go back to that, I'd like to hear more about that. And so that gets back to the engage and commit part of being an ally in those virtual spaces.
Great. And is there anything else that you think that students should know during this time?
There's a lot going on right now, and I think for students, it's overwhelming sometimes to think about all of these things that feel like they're happening outside of our control and feel like they're happening at warp speed and feel like we've not been here before. And so I think now is a really good time to make sure to be turning to our elders who have been here before. Certainly COVID is new, but the issues we're seeing around DEI are not new. They're amplified They feel like they're at kind of a crisis point right now. But we kind of go through these iterations every couple of decades. And I think what's really important right now is to think about where do you want to sit on this, right? In 20 years, looking back on this, what do you want your role to have been in all of this? Understanding how important it is to be engaged, and recognizing that every voice and every action really does matter, even when it feels like, well, I'm just one person, and particularly remotely, I'm just one person who's miles away from campus. What difference could I make? And the reality is that it matters a lot. It matters a lot in terms of getting your voice heard by faculty and by leadership in our university. It matters in your communities. It matters in terms of voting and making sure that your voice is heard there. It's really important through all of this that students don't lose hope and don't lose sight of kind of the opportunities that are here right now to move the conversation in a way that's productive and healing. And so thinking about how to be a good ally, a big part of it is the listening and learning, like really understand where we're at and how we got here. Listening to folks who have different experiences, both in terms of your colleagues, right, and other students and your peers, but also folks in your family and in your community. And then in terms of the engagement, really getting involved and being part of this process, not sitting on the sideline and feeling overwhelmed or somebody else will take care of it. The commitment part is honestly the hardest because we get exhausted, we get burned out, we get cynical, and it can be scary. It's a risk, right, to raise awareness about these things. Holding friends accountable means you might lose some of your friends. Holding a faculty member accountable, well, what is that going to do to my grade? Or how is this going to influence my job security or my chance of getting a job? DEI work and being an ally in general is a risk, but it is required, it's necessary. And so I hope that students kind of lean on one another and find that strength together, even if it's virtually, to make it less risky and to find that community to help them process what's happening. And move forward in a way that is empowering as opposed to feeling isolated. I think that's the biggest risk we face right now being virtual is that sense of isolation. You are not alone, and it's really important to find the community that cares to inspire you to keep moving forward, even with risk.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today. This was a very insightful conversation.
Well, thank you, Brittany. I'm so glad to have the opportunity, and I look forward to what comes next.
Sure thing. And that wraps up today's Just in Time. Be sure to stay tuned for our next video. Please be safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.